with an original finish on the inside. I'd be reluctant to do it from the outside if I had flat trim on the outside. So it depends on what you have.
I'm gonna look for that little door now, but in case I don't, and a lot of the lead weights have dropped down into the frame, do you recommend any of the retrofit spring pulleys versus pulling off all the trim and going in and trying to rescue that weight?
No.
Okay. Good to know.
Like I said, I think the design from this era I think it's the best design. I like the weights and the ropes. I think the pulleys are going to last forever. We'll get to that in a second when they don't. But they're easier to maintain for a longer period of time. It's a great design. The springs wear out faster. So, and they weren't designed that way to begin with. I like to stick with the original design for most things. Yes?
Do you find that working with varnished trim a bit easier to take off than painted trim?
Yes.
Or more brittle, or what's your experience with the varnished trims?
If you break off a little chunk and it's paint grade, it's easier to fill. That seam, because you break that seam, it's easier to fill with paint or with caulk. With the stain grade stuff, and you break that seam, especially if you have original finish, it's hard to match that. It can be done if you're neurotic enough, but it's trickier. So I'd be looking at like what the exterior trim is in that circumstance.
Well, because I don't have those little doors on the inside to get to the sash, so I'm looking at this one. Kind of the whole thing's got to come off on the inside. Of course, everything's all stained and varnished and looks really nice with the 1920s wood grain. I don't want to crack it because you can't replace that wood from the 20s.
Right. You can do it. You have to be extra careful, and you can get a seam to where when you put it all back together, you don't see the seam breaking. It's just you have to like take deep breaths and take a lot more time, but it can happen.
Patience is a virtue.
Patience is a virtue. Okay, so at this point, we've got, we're going to assume this stop and parting bead is off as well. And all of this is just like this. I typically, and I even got to the point where I wouldn't just go into a window and just fix like a broken rope or like fix a rotted sash or something like that. If I was going to take it all apart, I wanted to strip the channels and refinish the channels to where everything's going to work like new. It just seems like, again, you're going to be in there once, spend a little bit longer and do it right. I learned a great trick when I was doing this seminar last fall. If you're a general contractor, you have to take the lead certification class, and you've got to pay all this money and all this kind of stuff. And they come up with this whole protocol you have to follow, where you have a big plastic room and you have it all plastic off, and you have Tyvek suits. And if you had a contractor do this work, it would just cost 5 times as much to do it by those standards. I also realized that in the protocol it says that if you're only dealing with less than 6 square feet of lead-based paint, you don't have to follow a protocol. Like I said, I'm not a big math person. I haven't done the actual math, but it doesn't seem like it's 6 square feet. Also, and I'm not trying to skirt any kind of laws. If you're a homeowner, it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want, which seems crazy to me because the homeowner that doesn't know that has a small child is scarier than a contractor doing it.
When I was stripping those, I put an intake fan blowing air in at another window so that when I was working here, it blew out instead of settling into the ring.
That's a great way to go. I don't want to go into a whole bunch of lead stuff because I took the 8-hour class.
Did you wipe, I learned to wipe my dust with a damp cloth and wring it out.
Oh, of course.
Pick up, not a vacuum, not a broom, because you just,
So what I typically would do, and there was a person in last fall's class who, he was a lead expert. And I said, I don't know if the liquid way is better for the environment or better for you personally, or using a heat gun. And he said, actually, heat guns are better. I'm like, good, and they just like outlawed methylene chloride, which is like the really effective stripper anyway, but that stuff is messy and stinky and just nasty. But you're also not, heating up lead paint. But he did say with proper ventilation, that's the best thing you can do. That said, especially if you're homeowners doing this work, you don't have to follow the protocol. You still want to make sure that you're okay. What I would do is, I like using the heat gun to strip all the paint off of all these channels, all these surfaces. I would wear a mask, wear gloves. You kind of don't have to worry about ventilation because you're next to an open window, so that helps. But just kind of take care of yourself and do a little bit of research and make sure that you are following, lead safety as best you can.
What do you think, one of the things I've read is that, because I have a little kid at home, is using a steamer instead of a heat gun. So you're not turning that paint into an aerosol.
Wow,
You're just softening it up.
that could be good too.
Have you tried that? Does it work
I
well?
haven't tried it yet. It's probably why I'm here is because I'm like, I keep waiting to do these windows because I have anxiety about the lead
Yeah.
and about the party bee.
Well, good, we'll get to that. And especially like if you're working around small children, just keep them out of the space. Also, what I like to do when I was working as a private contractor is I would just do one of those zip walls where you can do plastic. If there are going to be people around, you want to plastic it off and just keep it and keep the area clean. That's the big thing about wipe everything down with the damp cloth when you're done. But so typically, in a nutshell, the process I would use, and I tend to think that I'm not neurotic, but I keep thinking that I mostly am, is the first thing I would do is heat gun all this off, and the big chunks of paint, I would just instantly throw away and just kind of keep it. And you want to put that stuff in a plastic bag, and you want to double tie it so it's all contained. At that point, this is the first expensive tool I recommend. This is, I'm only going to talk about 2 power tools here. I'll talk about 3. This is a fine multi-master. I've got it written down on the thing. And the reason why, instead of just any multi-tool, like if you went to Home Depot and bought, I actually, because I was, before I was working for the state, and I was doing a lot of this stuff, I thought, I'm going to buy a rigid, it's going to work fine. Noisy, rattly, it didn't contain the dust, it was not good. Fine even got better with their dust collection, to where it has this dust port, and you get the sandpaper with the holes, and you plug it into your vacuum, and as you're sanding that lead-based paint, even though you're wearing a mask, you're not having this big old cloud of dust going everywhere. You're containing most of it. That's fantastic, and that's what you really want. So, like $350 versus like $99 for one at Home Depot. There again, you're not spending $2,000 on a new window. So, buy one of these. It makes it worthwhile if you have small children, or if you're, doing a bunch of windows and you just want to take care of yourself. It's worth it.
You said 350?
About $350 or so.
What is it called?
It's a fine. It's on the. I think I put it on there.
This one?
It's a multi.
Yeah, but I thought it was spelled.
Yeah, so all the tools I will recommend, the power tools, they're all German, and I'm not endorsing any company, but they make the best stuff these days. Like the quality is just through the roof, and they even have long cords, and they have good dust collection. It's all that stuff that matters when you're using tools.
So how is it spelled? Because I thought it was EI.
It is.
It's EI.
Oh, because it's spelled wrong. Okay.
Oops.
Picky.
So, but basically to go over this, plug it into your vacuum. This is just wide enough to do everything that you want to do on this opening. It is great. And you can even very carefully hit this edge. You can get up in there, and you can, once the bulk of the paint is removed from the heat gun, you can take it down to bare wood with this. I don't like to go, even if there's a lot of paint in the wood, I don't like to go less than 60 grit. But I usually try to start at 80, finish up somewhere around 120. Doesn't need to be finer than that, but you don't want to be too coarse, because you'll see those marks and it'll change the shape of your wood. So,
How do you treat it after you sand it?
Hmm?
How do you treat that interior wood after you sand it?
We're not done sanding yet.
Jumping ahead.
Like I was saying, this is a mechanical surface, so it's really important. Also, the inside edge of your stop is a mechanical surface because your window sashes are constantly moving against those surfaces all the time. Also, we sand and strip these, but you still got this little area down here, and you got the corners up here, and you've got around your pulleys and all that kind of stuff. Good chisels and sharp chisels. If you use chisels, learn how to sharpen them and keep them sharp. You sharpen your chisel and you can and they dull really quickly when you use them as a scraper. So for a situation like this, you sharpen it and you do all that stuff and it just works wonders and gets it really, saves a lot of time. And you can actually scrape that edge and make small work out of it. After you chisel it, hand sand around there. Got to get all fussy around the pulleys. And then you're in good shape there. Pulleys. This age of window, 1920s, and I've seen like the teens up to like the, I think this is the last version of pulleys they did. They were just kind of, they had like a claw thing, and they were just pressed in, and they wouldn't come out. And they works fine. Been that way for 100 years, works fine. You tend not to see too many problems with them. This one is munched. This one's in bad shape. I don't know what happened to this one. If this is the case, work that thing out of there. Get on Amazon or go to, there aren't a lot of places locally that have this kind of thing, but that was cheap. I think they're like $10 for the new version of the pressed window pulley. And it'll probably go right in that same hole and you're gonna be fine. If you have an older house, there was a place in Midtown that had this style, and I've seen this a bunch of times. These are great. They're built really, really well. They're not as common, but if you know old house nerds like I do, you can call people up and they're like, "Oh yeah, I got a 5-gallon bucket of those in my garage. Yeah, how many do you need?" Okay, here's $25. Just kind of like work it out. But find old ones. I bet you can get on eBay and find these.
New home might sell that stuff. Did they even have replacement sashes, top and bottom?
Mhm.
That's the old time stuff. It's clear redwood. It's nice wood, but beyond that, they've got a lot of the hardware.
Yeah, they've got and you could even go in there and say like, "I need one of these," and they might know who to contact.
Also on second Sunday at the Antique Fair to the freeway, there's an old gentleman that's got doorknobs and lots of those pieces there too, so if you need something matched, you can take what you have over there to the Antique Fair
Absolutely.
and get those from the wall.
There's also a good site called House of Antique Hardware online that has a lot of those older.
Yeah.
So you're talking about sanding, and I think you mentioned stripping a couple of times. Do you do much stripping? I mean, like in your day job?
No.
Okay.
If I'm redoing a window, I will, but I don't do a lot of stripping with my job.
So even like in the corners and stuff where it's hard to get, you wouldn't use paint strip?
Not a liquid. No. It's messy. I don't like using it.
Okay, right.
It's messy and toxic, and the really good stuff, the effective stuff, isn't available anymore. So I know it does get used on some of our projects on larger contracts, but they usually have a crew doing a section. But for the stuff that I do, all the small fussy stuff, there's not enough stripping to do that.
What kind of heat gun do you use?
I think I have a Milwaukee. It's like
Or just a
one of the-
regular?
Yeah,
On a
I've
higher
had
low
for like, gazillion years. They're like pretty similar to all the other ones.
Is yours adjustable?
No, it just has 2 speeds, or two heats.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's,
High low.
yeah, it works. You learn how to use that heat gun for what you're doing. You don't want to hold it for too long, and you don't want to like discolor the wood. You don't want to like, put it towards your fingers. You learn all the tricks pretty fast. So, yeah, it's important. I've seen a lot of people, if they do window work, and just the last thing on pulleys, you can go to a website and you can buy some really fancy, cast pulleys. Or you can buy those $10 cheap ones. Buy the right one for your house, buy the right era for your house. That's the best thing you can do, because you don't need to overdo it if you don't have super nice pulleys. These cheap ones tend to work fine. These are 100 years old. They're so fine. The last thing I'll say about pulleys, people more neurotic than myself will go all crazy and now I need to lubricate in there and make sure everything's fully fine. I don't do that either. I don't lubricate them. It's 100 years old. It's still working fine. I think there's enough slop in those things to where there's not really going to be, you're not going to get any more performance out of it if you oil it. And you could argue that other tracks does. So, you're getting too nerdy at that point, so I just recommend that. Okay, so let's talk about the party beads. Oftentimes, these have a bunch of paint on them, just a bunch. You might break them, take them out, you might crack part of it. The bottom part where it sat in here and like a bunch of leaves might be all rotted out. I don't like it. And this is where things are going to get a little weird, because I also have a shop at my house and I have a shop at the state, and I've got decent enough tools to where I can make my own. You can go to New Home and they sell party bead. It's made out of new pine and it's thinner than what it should be. It doesn't quite work. It doesn't quite fit. These tend to be on most old windows, and there are some windows where it's way different dimensions. But 3/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch. Almost always in this era window. And they have half rounds on the top, half rounds on the bottom. So I'll just sit in my shop and I'll just make a bunch of these. That way I have a stash of nice old Doug fir party beads. Before I go too much down this rabbit hole, it's sorry to not stay linear on all this stuff. Talking about wood a little bit. People tend to make the assumption that all the windows and a lot of the framing in their house is redwood. It usually isn't. It's usually Doug fir. And a lot of the trim would be redwood. So I think the majority of the windows that I've seen in California, they're made out of Douglas fir. Old growth Douglas fir. And it's old and it looks like this, and it's like you just assume it's redwood. It's not. You just want to stay consistent, and so just don't make that assumption. And I want to go back talking about these doors again. I've also opened up some windows, and these are missing. That's a drag, because they're not that big of a piece, but there are a bunch of different aspects to it that you have, in reproducing it, you have to make it exactly like the ones that you have. And it's kind of a drag, because the thickness is a little bit different. This isn't the standard 3/4 of an inch thickness.
What is the name of that?
It's the little pocket door, but this is Douglas fir.
What is the piece called?
It's like a window pocket door, or like a window pulley, or window weight door. I don't know what the technical term is on the...
Jam door.
Yeah, it might be called different things, but yeah.
How do you know if it's missing?
Because once you pull it out, you don't see where
Yeah. There.
It ain't there.
Yeah. It's not very common, but it has happened. And you have to just make a new one. And it takes a little bit of time to make one, because there are a lot of different things you have to set up for it. Make this. Usually you have to plane it down to the correct thickness and set your dado setup with kind of dado, and then you got to figure out all those dados. So you spend a couple hours just making one little piece that you're not going to see.
So just by pulling the window up and down, you still can't tell if that's missing?
Sometimes if it's missing, the window will be in there and it'd be caulk shut and not usable. So it's just been hidden away like that for years. So you don't know that it's not there until you pull it. So, yeah. It's not very common, but it does happen. There are a lot of unknowns you run into with these situations. But going back to wood real quick, and during the break, check this thing out. This is just an old window. And, you know, people put in new windows, so you just throw these things in the dumpsters, these old things. This is beautiful. This is perfectly quarter sawn, straight vertical grain, Douglas fir, super tight. You couldn't even buy this today. It's fantastic. So just keep that in mind with your sashes and with your frames and all that stuff. It's worth spending the time to do this so you can keep that, because you couldn't make it that way. You couldn't make it that good. So just a little wood nerdy thing.
Does it also harden with time?
I think because it was tighter grained, I think it tended to be harder. Also, it's denser and drier, you know. Denser because it's old growth, and, and drier because it's been sitting in a dry environment for 100 years, which is the perfect kind of wood drying.
Yeah.
Oftentimes when I'll make party beads, I try not to throw nice wood away, so I'll keep some old 100-year-old wood from some project, and you can make a bunch of these out of a piece of wood. So let's make party beads out of old Doug fir.
If you didn't have access to tons of really cool old wood, what would you make a replacement for? Would you make it out of modern Doug fir?
I would go to a place like Burnett & Sons and ask for vertical grain, clear, dry Doug fir. And the Doug fir that you can get these days is pretty good. You can get, this is new vertical grain Doug fir. And keep in mind, when I say Doug fir, you go to Home Depot and get a 2x4, that's technically Doug fir. And we all know, like, you know, the rings are that wide apart, and it's already got like a big old potato chip shape to it. And if you buy really kiln dried, vertical grain clear Douglas fir at a place like Burnett's, you're gonna pay a lot more. But it's also like two different types of wood between the 2x4 and this kind of stuff, so.
Why not just go with the hardwood like E-Pig? That stuff is straight as an arrow. It's all vertical grain and it's hard. So if you got some tools to do a little cutting, you know, it's gonna last.
Yeah, but if you do everything correctly, using the same kind of wood that it originally had, it's gonna also last. And you're also kind of like honoring.
It's got the same expansion coefficient and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of the way the house is designed.
I found if you go on Craigslist or even OfferUp, people are still selling, 2x4s for my old house for $5 a piece. And they've got 8-foot long, you know, still kind of fuzzy on the outside 2x4s. Or my neighbor down the street, he was gutting his entire kitchen because he wanted to put a modern kitchen in his, you know, bungalow. So he had all this wood sitting in the dumpster, and I went and picked it all out. I got a stack of it at home.
And they built differently back then. You know, they always say like, oh, they don't build them like they used to.